What if I told you you could get a 999cc inline-4 motorcycle making nearly 150 horsepower, fully adjustable Showa suspension, a TFT display, and a quick shift up and down for under $11,000?
Well, I'd say you're talking about the Honda Hornet CB1000 SP.
It was a rhetorical question for dramatic effect.
Oh, sorry, I'm still learning all this. Keep it going.
We sent producer Logan out to California to check out the new Honda Hornet SP.
Wait, I'm going to California?
We're gonna see if it's a parts bin special or if it can really live up to the hype as the new D-Gen Squid Missile.
Dude, I'm not even packed or anything, dude.
Let's see what he had to say about it.
Producer Logan here, broadcasting live from sunny California. We are somewhere about halfway between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, about to spend a day doing some awesome riding on these new motorcycles from Honda. So right here we've got the CB1000 Hornet SP. So this is kind of their flagship, new flagship naked bike. And what's really interesting about this bike is, well, it is a flagship machine, kind of the top of the line. It's incredibly affordable. That was kind of Honda's deliberate strategy with this bike, is making something competitive, powerful, fun to ride, but accessibly priced and accessible, in its ergonomics, the way it makes this power, like something an average Joe with a little bit of seat time, a little bit of experience can enjoy. So starting down, we've got the engine, inline-4, pulled from the CBR1000RR. It's making about 155 horsepower. It's got new valves, new valve timing, and a different tune on it, to accommodate more low-end grunt, more mid-range power, more street-biased power delivery. Paired with that, we've got a new transmission unique to this motorcycle. Gears 2 through 5 have been shortened for quicker acceleration while leaving a long ratio in 6 for highway cruising, fuel efficiency, that sort of thing. This is the SP model, the only version available here in the States. So that means we've got the Brembo Stylema calipers, the fully adjustable Öhlins fork here in the front in this beautiful gold color, as well as this fully adjustable Öhlins shock in the rear. Big exhaust can, what can you do? We live in 2025, you got to put those on there. But this bike does sound pretty sweet. It's got a low burble, revs out, sings like a 4-cylinder. Don't silence the scream. Pretty intuitive electronic suite. You've got your basic, your ride modes, standard mode, sport mode, look at the wind, he's going so fast, rain mode, user mode 1 and 2, so you can save your settings if you end up owning this bike and you want to tweak things to your personal preference. Pretty basic, similar to what you see on the CB750 as well as the Transalp. But that's it, and like I said, $10,999. It's a ton of motorcycle for the money. It's not really, it doesn't feel like a parts bin special. It doesn't feel piecemeal together. It feels like a unique special motorcycle. We still have this Hornet silhouette. We've got the head, the tapered wings, the thin waist, the stinger, or the thorax, or whatever you call that on a Hornet. And that was what Honda's always said, is the Hornet line kind of hybridizes affordability and approachability and performance. And from what I've seen so far, the CB1000 Hornet SP kind of hits the nail on the head for that assignment. So what do you say we get it out on the road and put it through its paces? We're out on the CB1000 Hornet SP. We went over the specs already in the kind of pre-ride overview, and now it's time to talk about its road manners now. As I discussed already in the intro, Honda's goal with the Hornets has been a combination of approachability and performance. And if you think about the Hornet SP trying to be a sort of every man's leader bike, so we're out here in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, sort of in every man's riding terrain, right? I'm kidding, of course. Not everyone has access to this type of beautiful scenery on a regular basis, but even whether you do or you do not, the Hornet SP is a pretty easy bike to get along with. If you can see, I've got pretty comfortable ergonomics here, pretty short reach to the tank. I feel pretty confident, with a good bend in my elbow, good leverage with this wide handlebar. Foot pegs, relatively, mid-set, not too far back. This isn't a sport bike or a race park bike, although it does share quite a bit of DNA from the CB1000R platform in the way of the engine. Again, as I talked about in the specs, we've got about 155 horsepower on tap, give or take. The Honda execs don't tell you that in the presentation, but from what I've gathered online, it's putting about 155 horsepower down. And you know, like a lot of you know, I was talking to some of my colleagues earlier, sort of the difficulty with reviewing bikes these days is they're all so good and so easy to ride. Like, yeah, this makes 155 horsepower, but it's in no means a monster, right? Like, this isn't a Super Duke. It's not trying to lift the front wheel in every gear the minute I exit a turn. And since we're talking about the engine and talking about exiting a turn, something I have noticed is this bike isn't shy about being a 4-cylinder, isn't shy about reminding you that it is an inline 4. You know, depending on how and when you shift, you can kind of hit some, like, you know, you can be in the power, shift up, and then immediately be out of the power and just lose all your kind of mojo. As someone that rides a parallel twin, is used to twin-cylinder motorcycles, that is a bit of a learning curve. If you're, you know, an inline 4 Chad, you're probably no stranger to just staying on the beans all the time, revving it out to 10,000, 11,000 RPMs the entire time you ride. But for someone that's used to a parallel twin or a 2-cylinder engine, having a little bit more spread of power, that takes a little bit of getting used to. But I will say, once you get around, 6,000, 7,000 RPM, she definitely likes to boogie. On these tight, twisty forest roads, I can't open it up quite a bit, but I'm sure I'll find some time to show you a little bit more about that as we keep riding here today. Braking, of course, yeah, good. We got those Brembo Stylemo calipers. I got a lot of bite, good lever feel. Back brake is just a Nissan caliper, but I mean, who's really using their back brake? You know, you're not a Harley rider. Just kidding, of course, as I use my back brake here into this corner. And then, yeah, as far as seat comfort, rather comfortable. Firm but comfortable, like any good seat should be. You know, you don't want to be sitting in what feels like a blown out old couch, but you also don't want to be sitting on what the equivalent of a skateboard deck. So and again, I think going with the approachability meets performance angle with this new Hornet line, the ergos and the power definitely kind of balance each other out. You know, I've been riding here 100 miles so far today, and I'm not feeling too fatigued, too uncomfortable, too cramped. And I am I don't know, larger guy too, right? 6'2", 240, lean. That's a joke, obviously. I'm 5'11" and about 190 pounds. But I'm not too cramped. I've got a good feel on the tank with my legs. That's an issue sometimes you run into with the kind of more angular naked bikes. And let's not rear end Whitney going into this corner. Something you can find with those kind of ultra angular naked bikes, sometimes your knees can... What are you doing, going off road here? But to my point, tank is a good shape. It's got a nice roundness to it, not particularly angular, and it feels really good against my knees. Some tank grips would be a worthwhile aftermarket option. You know, being able to keep that leverage with your legs and not on your hands would improve your comfort for sure. But so far on this, like, just general overview, right, this kind of layman's perspective, I think any sort of intermediate rider would have a good time on this bike. If you're an ultra expert, you know, 200 horsepower track day junkie, maybe you'll feel a little bit let down. But I think for the average intermediate street rider, intermediate to, you know, experienced street rider, I think they could have a blast on this, especially if you're looking to retain that sort of inline 4 character and novelty that is becoming less and less commonplace in today's market. And at that price point, $10,999, like, that you get so much motorcycle. The brakes, the engine, the cast wheels pulled from the CBR1000, like, you get a lot of bike for under $11,000 MSRP. You know, that sure beats, you know what, like a Z900 or whatever the equivalent bargain ish 4-cylinder bike is. So yeah, so far the only really downsides I'm experiencing are, and the first one is, you know, the downsides of an inline-4 engine. That's also personal preference. Like, I like that kind of immediate low-down torque. The CB1000 Hornet SP, you know, likes to rev out. Definitely likes to rev out to bring on that power, and depending on how and when you're shifting, it can kind of create sort of a lag in your acceleration. Speaking of lag, the only other thing negative so far that I'm experiencing is there's this kind of like strange dead spot, like in when you let off throttle. Getting on throttle feels pretty good, pretty smooth, pretty linear, but when you're at speed, getting off throttle, if you can see that, like it cuts really hard. Like, you know, a lot of times the engine brake settings, like it'll keep adding fuel a little bit to engine brake more or less smoothly depending on your situation. And the only other downside I'm really noticing on this motorcycle is there's a kind of a bit of a dead spot when you immediately go off throttle. Getting on throttle is pretty smooth and pretty linear, but when you're at speed, when you let off the throttle, there's kind of a very abrupt, immediate, like engine brake seize thing. If you can see me lurch forward like that, you know, that could be something in the ECU settings. I am in just normal road mode right now, and I know in Honda's tech suite on here there is adjustability to that you can make to the engine braking, so maybe something I could tweak and it would kind of smooth that out. But as is, you know, bone stock unmessed with road mode, that immediate off throttle can definitely be a little bit jarring. So one of Honda's specific goals with this motorcycle is to make a super competitive bike, a ton of value, ton performance at a super good price. And at that price point, asking $10,999 MSRP, you definitely get a ton of motorcycle. But the question is, like, how did Honda do it? How did Honda manage to make such a fun, competitive bike at such a great price? I think a lot of people were concerned that it'd be kind of a parts bin special, lots of recycled components, and really I don't feel that to be the case at all. You know, we've got the engine from the CBR1000RR, we've got the wheels are kind of inspired by that too, these cool cast spoke wheels, but otherwise it's a brand new frame, and I think they said something like 80% more torsional rigidity than the outgoing CB1000R frame, which is, you know, that's got to be a night and day difference. And the CB1000R is always kind of an odd duck in the hyper naked class, if you can even call it that. So they really wanted to put in the work to make the CB1000 Hornet SP, you know, a far thing from a parts bin special. So we got a unique frame, a unique transmission. The gearbox is exclusive to this machine. It's got gears 2 through 5 are altered for increased acceleration. You know, you don't have that super long leader bike gearing where you're going 100 miles an hour in first gear. They shortened them a bit for better acceleration, with the 6th gear remaining a higher ratio for you know, highway cruising, fuel efficiency, all that good stuff. And you know, we do get some components that are shared with other platforms. You know, this dash is very similar, if not identical, to the one found on the CB750 and the Honda Transalp. The tech package is relatively similar too, although I believe the Hornet SP has a little bit room for more customizability, two user modes where you can save your settings, as opposed to the one on at least on the Transalp. Yeah, and being here in the back of the Hornet 1000 SP, it doesn't feel like a parts bin special. It doesn't feel like a kind of ramshackle, piecemealed motorcycle Frankenstein monster. Like, it feels like a proper bespoke motorcycle. You know, you've got Honda was very specific about the design, you know, staying true to the Hornet silhouette, you know, with the head and the sculpted tank, you know, similar to a bee with its folded wings, its seats, which is the narrow waist, and then this tail section here. It feels, you know, it's got kind of Street Fighter vibes, you know, the Street Fighter we have at home, if you get the meme reference. But it's a cool looking bike, and like I said, it feels proper, it feels substantial. It doesn't feel like a you know, a cheap cash grab by any stretch of the imagination. And I think Honda, having seemingly endless resources and a massive budget, has really allowed them to kind of work wonders to provide so much motorcycle for such a good price. Like I said, just under $11,000. I thought it'd be a good time to talk about, you know, a little bit more performance-wise. You know, we've got these big, beautiful sweepers, not so many cars. We can talk about, yeah, how it handles, you know, trying to get after it a little bit. And as you guys probably know, I'm not the experienced track day junkie, reformed street squid that your dear old Papa Yam is. I've got a little bit more of a humble riding background, but still I think that lends credence to reviewing this bike. You know, that's meant to be a sort of approachable performance flagship naked bike from Honda. So on these twisty roads here, you know, our braking is good. Like I said, there's a little bit of that dead spot in the throttle that is a little bit less than confidence inspiring, but like I said, it's more frequently on deceleration or engine braking versus accelerating. And then here on the side of the tire, feels good, feels planted. It is a little bit of a bigger bike, bigger engine, more rotational mass. It's gonna be a little bit slower to dip into corners as compared to something like you know, something with a V-twin or, you know, a fully fared naked bike whose geometry is a little bit more designed for this type of thing. Not that this is not designed for it. And like I said, Honda did a lot of work kind of making the frame and the overall architecture of this bike far more performance oriented than the CB1000R that came before it. And yet, being an inline 4, I'm not having to do much in the way of shifting. I'm pretty much just put it in second gear and I'm riding it like a scooter. You know, this isn't my motorcycle, and I'm sure Honda has built this thing, massively over-engineered this thing that I could just keep it revved to 6, 8, 10,000 RPM all day in second gear, and it's not going to hurt a darn thing. But if I were on a more open road that would require me to move through the gearbox a little bit more, I will say the quick shifter on this machine is very, very smooth. The upshifts specifically, buttery smooth. I mean, I'll do a couple quick. See, I'm not even on the throttle hard, and it just slips right in. Smooth as butter. Don't downshift too aggressively because the downshift is not quite as smooth, I will say. I think you can adjust some settings, sensitivity for the lever, and that might make it work a little bit better for the way I ride. But for me, initial impressions, it feels like a little bit clunky compared to the upshifts, which are buttery smooth. We've had a good deal of bumps on these roads too, you know, tree roots and things like that. These are kind of old mountain logging roads or something, and the suspension's just eating it up. Like, we've got that fully adjustable Olin shock in the back. Are getting after it a little bit there. Tire in the road, tire in the road. And well, it sounded like I was disparaging inline 4s a little bit. It is nice to just be able to rev it out and not have to worry too much about, you know, getting outside the power run. But as I was saying, was enduring a good fair share of bumps and ruts in the road on the ride today. I didn't have the tech, you know, adjust anything for my weight or anything. It felt pretty good, or it feels very good right from the jump. But I gotta say, even though it's stiff and willing to lean and a good amount of, you know, kind of feel and feedback when you're coming into corners and stuff, that shock definitely does a good job at eating up the bumps. I haven't noticed anything in the way of bottoming out or anything like that. And now that we're on this kind of two-lane highway, we can talk about its highway manners a little bit. Obviously, plenty of power on tap. I keep forgetting that I'm going, you know, 70 or 80 miles an hour, and I'll be in like second or fourth gear, because plenty of power on tap to get you up to speed and have a little fun doing it. I will say this bike makes no concessions in the way of wind protection. I'm getting beaten on the chest with wind all day out here at these high speeds. But that's just the naked bike life, and it comes with the territory. And like I said, most modern bikes are very good, very smooth, very capable. And if any motorcycle can do anything, it's, you know, ride on the highway at highway speeds. And this bike certainly has no problem doing so. Like I said, I've been third, fourth gear, just ringing it out all day, and it's having a great time. All right, boys, I thought I'd give you one last highway pull just to see what this old girl's all about. So we got her in sport mode. We're gonna do the 80 to 110 tests, brought to you by State Farm Insurance. I'm just kidding, of course. Bear with me while I stick with the group. Yeah, she's pretty fast. Fast enough for a guy like me. All right, boys, thanks for sticking with me here today as we tried out this new Honda CB1000 Hornet SP out here in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I'm currently on my descent at the moment. Wish me luck, and I'm gonna kick it back to the studio and we'll wrap things up.
All right, producer Logan, you're back here in Austin testing
back.
the CB1000 Hornet. How'd it go?
It was good. My experience with bikes of that girth is a little bit limited. You know, I think that's probably the largest displacement, like Japanese, you know, inline four motorcycle I've ever ridden. I've never ridden a true leader bike. So it was a new experience for me. With that being said, I think I brought probably an interesting perspective to this sort of review thing, because big thing with these new Hornets from Honda is they're really aimed at, you know, approachability meets performance. You know, it's not necessarily a bike that maybe a massive track day junkie or Euro squid would get down with, but for an average intermediate street rider that's got, you know, 5 years experience or so, that wants just kind of the dummy go fast bike at 11,000 bucks, you know, it kind of starts to make some more sense.
So this motorcycle, it's $11,000. It makes potentially the most horsepower of any dollar figure bike that you can go and buy.
Sure.
But there's a caveat, right? As we've learned, is this motorcycle actually similar to the Fireblade RRR SP, very detuned in North America, right?
Yeah, so this information's kind of all coming out like literally today as we're working on this video. So I didn't mention it in the vlog. I was kind of under the impression that the 1000 was gonna be limited the same way the 750 is. You know, the 750 in Europe makes like 95 or 90 horsepower. Here in the US it makes like 85 or something.
Yeah.
But for the 1000 it's actually a much larger delta, 155 horsepower in Europe, only 130 crank horsepower here in the US. So yeah, like 25 ponies is not anything to ignore.
So it's, you know, something that I was thinking about, because a lot of people are saying, oh, like this bike destroys the competition with the MT-09 and, you know, the other bikes in the segment. But really in stock form, at 460 pounds wet and ready to ride and 130 horsepower, it's kind of close to the MT-09, really, you know? And I don't know, like the MT-09 is a pretty formidable motorcycle. It handles beautifully. It works really well. It's got a lot of character out of the triple. Do you feel like this motorcycle has been hampered because it doesn't have that top end power? I mean, you were messaging me saying you're ready to be a street squid.
Yeah,
so.
It's hard to say, because before even knowing about the specs, and again, specs don't mean everything. On the bike, I had a lot of fun, especially on the highway or big open roads. It was a little bit of a beast to handle in the twisty sections. You know, it's a bigger bike. The throttle's like a little bit twitchy. It's got this strange on-off throttle thing, especially on decel. Found myself lurching quite a bit.
And so that wasn't a setting you could change with engine braking, right?
Yeah, what everybody there kind of gathered was, unless it was in rain mode, it was making this kind of strange on-off thing. So I was already under the assumption that if this were a bike that someone like myself would own, I would want to flash it anyway, just to kind of smooth out that throttle response. But now knowing, okay, if I spend, you know, however much money to flash it for the throttle response, I can also unlock 30 more horsepower, especially with an exhaust.
The CB1000R, you know, it's kind of being panned online a little bit as like a parts bin bike. I think a lot of people are saying like, oh, Honda just like kind of slapped something together, trying to sell it for cheap, trying to beat out the Chinese. Did it feel that way to you? Is this like slapdash like thing? Or
No,
did it just pull together?
So in person, and as I think comes across in the vlogs, like I was impressed by it. Like, you know, you can make jokes. It's the Street Fighter you have at home, you know, because it does have that kind of, yeah, Street Fighter look, but it feels premium and it feels relatively unique. You can kind of see where things come from or distilled down from, even things to where the 750 has self-canceling turn signals, so CB1000 doesn't, because it's kind of where the 750 is a sort of ground up new model. The 1000 is kind of pieced together from different existing platforms. But still, it feels like a cohesive package. It feels nice. You know, it's got the gold Showa suspension, the Öhlins shock in the back, the gold wheels that are from the CBR 1000 that look pretty sweet, the gold spoked wheels. It does feel premium, especially when you consider what it costs. It's just those little kind of things where you can start to see where, call it regulations, call it whatever you want. I call it Honda being Honda, and they kind of, you know, neuter their bike a little bit.
Yeah. So if you were to rate it 1 out of 10, what would you give me?
So as is, like from the dealership for 11,000 bucks, I'd rate it maybe like a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Considering what the aftermarket's going to look like for this bike here, whether it's, you know, ECU flash companies, exhausts, all that stuff, and what it costs, especially if you can buy one, pick one up used in a couple years, then it's looking maybe more like a 7.5 if you just want that, you know, like dummy, go fast highway squid bike. But for as is from the factory, maybe a 6.5 or so.
Yeah. I think we're going to have to get you on a proper Japanese squid missile at some point. Because 120 horsepower, 130, whatever it makes, it's just simply not the real deal. We got to get you on an R1 or a ZX10 or something to experience full widescreen yeet energy. Hopefully someday we can do that for you. But folks, give producer Logan some loving comments down below. His first time doing a press event for us over here on Yami Noob. We truly do appreciate it. We got some really cool content coming up later in the next couple of weeks. Thanks so much for checking out today's video. We appreciate it. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later. I'm like a bird, I wanna fly away. I don't know where my soul is. I don't know where my home is. Da 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 da. I'm like a bird, I wanna fly away. I don't know where my soul is. Oh, hey. You're still here. Man, this is awkward. You should, you should keep watching Yami Noob.